Hello, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Yes, so hopefully you've all had a great Christmas and New Year, and here we are in 2025 already. So yeah, I'm hoping to bring you lots more content this year. I've had a bit of a break over the last few weeks just to recharge and spend some time with the family, but hopefully we can get cracking with some new videos over the coming weeks stroke months. So for some time now I've been wanting to get hold of a dash cam. Now in a previous video I showed you a stereo that we put into the car that actually added a rear camera, and the rationale behind that was obviously I wanted to be able to see the tow bar when connecting to the Caravan when I'm on my own, just so I can just make it easier. Now to take that to one step further, obviously I wanted to be able to add some security to the actual car as well. So obviously having a recording camera at the front and the rear, that would give me a bit more peace of mind. But obviously the dash cams have come on a long way now, so there's lots of other features which I'll talk about in a second. But one of them was actually having a real-time visibility of what's actually happening behind. And the way this dash cam works is you can have multiple split screens and have a view that you want, but obviously it's recording both as well, giving you that peace of mind. So what I'll do is I'll go in to actually show you what we've got and yeah, what it comes with. So as I said, I've been looking for a dash cam for some time now and sort of doing my research in terms of finding a model that ticks all the boxes. Now I settled on a WOLFBOX G900 Pro, and when I did sort of reach out to them and had a bit of discussion around making sure it was going to actually do what it said on the tin, they did actually send me a unit out to actually sort of test out and see how it got on. Now they also gave me a discount code as well of 20% off, so I'll leave that in the description below if that's something that you're interested in. So this is the WOLFBOX G900 Pro. It is a 5K camera, but only when using the front camera on its own. Once it's attached to the rear camera, it will drop down the quality to 4K and 2.5K on the rear. It does have super night vision mode, and I will show you some of the footage of that later on. It also has 2 mics built in, so it is voice activated, so you don't need to be distracted by touching it or anything along those lines. It does have Wi-Fi, and that's built in, so you can download the app as well. But again, it will give you some of the footage areas of where you're going in terms of a map. But again, you will need the GPS to get the data with that as well. And the other side of that is obviously it'll give you a visual of your speed when using the GPS. And the actual unit itself is a 12-inch touchscreen, so it's a good size. And again, that's needed. So again, you can see the 2 different images if you decide to have it split screen when going along. Otherwise, you won't get the benefit. So yeah, a good size screen. So this is what you get in the box. Obviously, you get your normal installation manuals and the main mirror itself. On the bottom, you've got your mics and your power button, and then on the top, you've got your power to the device. You've got your input for your rear camera. You've got a 128 gig SD card that comes part of the package, and your GPS port that you plug into. Apart from that, you've got a reset button on the back, and you've got your main camera itself, which obviously you can move around to get to the right position on your vehicle. Now, first looks at this is, like I say, it's a really nice bit of kit and how that's made. You've got a heat shrink here to get rid of any sort of heat that's built up in the device itself, and then obviously you've got your rear speakers and your mounting points here. But yeah, first impressions is a nice bit of kit and how that's made. So one of the options here is obviously a cigarette lighter to power the device. What you may find with this though, yes, it's an easier install because this does come with a full wiring kit to the mains of the actual car itself. But unless this actually operates when the ignition is off, one of the features that won't work with this, which I think is one of the selling points, is if your car does actually get knocked and it activates the G sensor on that, it will actually record and take that footage. So again, if you're away shopping or whatever the circumstances may be, again, it will take that footage and save it actually on the device as well, where again I think that's a crucial bit of kit on there. So again, you won't get that, but the way to find out if your ignition does work or your cigarette lighter works is obviously to just, when the key's out of the car, just plug it in and see what happens. Either the device will turn on or it won't, but it won't, then obviously, yeah, this might not be the best option. You've got your GPS, and again, that can just be mounted in the dash somewhere, either visible or underneath, up to you. Now when it comes to actually mounting it, you've got some different straps. Obviously it goes over your existing mirror. Now one of the accessories they have is actually a new mirror mount, so that might be an option that you look for, but it will be dependent on the vehicle specification, so it doesn't support everything, but I will be going down this route. And then this is your camera. And again, that's the port that will plug into the top of your mirror. And then the only thing that you need to factor in with this is obviously this will be needing to be connected to your reversing wire in the loom to be able to trigger the camera when you put your car into reverse. But again, I'll be showing you that process later on. And then yeah, the other bit is depending on sort of the length of the cable, you will just need to be able to check through that and make sure it does actually reach. But again, there's quite a lot of length there. And I know on a previous sort of setup we've done with a different manufacturer, the length looks fine for what we need. And obviously that's going to go from the rear of the car through the head lining and then back down to obviously where the mirror is. And then you've got your sort of usual prise tool to get some of the trim. And then you've got some different mounting ideas for the cable management as well as the actual camera. So depending on where you're going to put this camera. Now I'm thinking I'm going to keep this actually in the van at the rear to get me a different angle than what's actually there at the moment going into the stereo, because obviously I've got a rear camera for that. So I did want to trial that actually being inside the van just to see if that makes a difference, and also give me a slightly higher angle and to be able to face that down if needs be when using the Caravan. But again, I'll have a little play with those angles, but that's the idea. And obviously you've got your mounting tape here if you want to go down that route instead of having to screw it in. So if you are going to hardwire this into the actual fuse box, which is probably the recommended way to do this to keep it again tidy without cables going everywhere, would be this method. So you do get obviously multiple connections here. You will need two for this setup, and again they come included in the kit. This is your main sort of power once it's all hooked up. Obviously that goes to your main mirror itself. You've got a ground cable, you'll have an ignition cable and a power cable. So one will go to your battery with a continuous 12 volt feed, and then the other one will be an ignition that obviously when you turn the key on will then actually give you the 12 volts within that space. But again, you'll need to look at your fuse box diagram to work out what you do there. But again, I'll go into a bit more detail once we get to that. But you probably will need a multimeter to be able to work out if you've got the actual right fuse location. Just to let you know though, if you do intend to put this in a different vehicle, I don't know, a Sprinter or a lorry or something along those lines, they do a longer kit in terms of the actual wiring harness for the camera. So again, I think this is about 5 meters, so I think this will be more than ample for most vehicles, and it just attaches with that plug, and then you can attach it to the additional one if required. But yeah, I think the default one will be more than ample to start with. But yeah, we'll get it installed and see what happens. One of the other things that they actually have is a filter for the actual dash cam itself. So again, it's entirely up to you, and I will do some footage on this to see how well this performs as well, because I've obviously not got around to testing this out yet. But again, I will look at that just to see what difference that makes, and I'll add some footage in the video just so again you can compare. Rightio, so I'm going to get the mirror installed now. I'm going to use the default sort of straps that go on there, but just before that I am just going to test out whether my actual cigarette lighter works with the ignition off. And again, something you probably want to test just to see if you've got that feature or not. Okay, so that tells me that I could use that feature if I wanted to, and power this device, but it would mean having all this on exposed and this being sort of cables reaching around. So it's not something I want to do, but it does actually tell you that it does actually function. It's giving you the time, the date, and what it's recording into as well. So like I said, by default, because this hasn't got the rear camera, it's going to have 5K recording capability straight out the box. But okay, let's get this mounted up. So that was quite straightforward enough, quite sturdy with those different brackets, and there's still a gap there to be able to move the camera once I've got it in the final position. And again, that looks quite nice as well. I am intending to move this microphone that's built into the stereo, just so again that comes closer to me on the right hand side. But yeah, so far so good. So the next stage I'm going to work on is actually getting the rear camera fitted and the wiring fed through to the front of the van, and then once I've done that I can then get everything done in one hit. So when it comes to actually finding the reverse light, you can obviously look at the wiring diagrams online, but to be double sure, if you put your ignition on and put your car in reverse, obviously with the engine off, you'll get the actual signal light, and then you can go across the terminals to find the negative and then go across the others until you see it pulsing, and you'll see on there. So put the negative from the first one and go along. Now I know the last one is the one I'm after, but you'll get no readings until the last one, but I see 12 volts. And then obviously to check that, you can then put your car, turn the reversing and put it into park, and then just make sure that that number disappears, and then you've then identified that you've got the correct one allocated. So for me, it's green and black is what I need to connect to in terms of getting the rear camera to work. Rightio, so that's soldered back in onto the connection. I'll tidy that up in a minute, but what I'll do is I'll go and test the actual wiring connection to the mirror just to make sure that this does actually work as I intended it to do. So just as a test, I've got it connected to the USB socket and the rear cable, and just to make sure that works, I'll put the ignition on. So that should bring this to life. Like so. So there's the working. Oh, let me take this off, it'd be easier. That's up and running, and then if I put it into reverse, hopefully, and there we have it. Reversing camera is working. So we can get the back of the car all put back together, and yeah, then we can get on to actually wiring in the electrics at the front. Rightio, so that's all the panels back, and that's where I intend to have the camera. And again, the only issue I might have is this window is tinted, so I will see how we get on with this. If it doesn't work as well as I want, I'll have to mount this the same as I did with this one, and I'll just replace the stereo one because I don't really fancy having two cameras, but yeah, we'll see what happens. So you can see the camera right at the back still, so again, lots of different movement. I can use that to angle it, and then the cable was running all the way along
and then down the pillar, which I've taken the trim off. The GPS is underneath here, and again it should be fine because I've got the same kind of GPS on the stereo, and underneath works totally fine. But again, we can double check that. And then the other cables are running up and along as well. So we've got the rear camera, the GPS, and the power. Now the power's coming down the pillar, and it's these wires here. So that's the next job, is to actually get these put into the fuse box and see how we get on. I had to take a glove box out to access all this for myself, but again, that may be different for you, and depends on how you're going to go about this. So I'll get all that tidied up, and then we'll get around to doing the fuse stuff. So in terms of the ignition one, I've just tapped into the original one that I put in for the stereo. And again, that works off the ignition. It's just the, what is that, the fourth one in that you can see in the middle row that gives you that. But again, you can test all this with a multimeter going across the points before and after the ignition is on. But that's given me that. And in terms of a consistent power source of 12 volts, again, you're going to need to go through your wiring diagram to understand where you've got that. Now I've tapped into the one for the stereo again, because again I had to add a feed to that as well. So yeah, it will be a case of using a multimeter to find out what's the best solution for you. Like with any hardware, you want to make sure it's on the very latest firmware. Obviously this is a computer at the end of the day feeding all this, so it's just a case of touching the screen, going to the settings. You would scroll to the bottom where you can find your product information. It'll tell you your firmware. You can then go to the website to check to see if there's a later version. If there is, it's a case of formatting your SD card. I haven't got one installed at the moment. You have to follow that process. So format it on here, then take it out, go and transfer the file from the website, the firmware. Then you would come back in, reinsert the card. When you turn it on for the first time, it will detect the file and then install. And again, we'll do that in a second just to show you what that looks like. Rightio, so I've just installed the SIM card. There you go, straight away it's found the firmware. Click confirm. And then it should just be a case of it will restart with the new version. And then obviously to check to make sure that you have got the latest version, obviously just go back through. You'd go back, check your product information, just make sure now it is reading the new version. And then the final step is to format the card again, because you don't want the actual firmware taking up the space. And what I have just noticed is actually it's turned some of the presets back on that I turned off, so the actual touching tones are back on. So yeah, you may need to reconfigure that if you've changed the main settings. But that's the process of upgrading the firmware. So when we installed this, we had two connections, one going to the 12 volt for a consistent supply, and that enables the G sensor to be active when the ignition is off. So it looks like the unit itself is completely off, but it is still doing something whilst it's in standby, so it is still registering for any sort of shocks. So if your car was to get hit whilst you're away, it will actually activate and save that footage for you. And then obviously the other wire was going to the ignition switch, so when you turn the engine on, like so, after a few seconds obviously it will enable that to switch on. So that's the reason for the other wire. So as I said, now it's done the firmware upgrade, I just want to check the settings again, because it did sound like it put some of it back on. So we go back into our settings, resolution, no, that one's fine, I think that's a standard. Sound recording, that's fine. G-Sense is on medium. volume, tone, switch that off. Screensaver, that looks all good. Speed unit, yep, miles per hour. So as you see, there's lots of different things you can actually change on this, so it's just about a case of going through and just setting it up for your needs. But yeah, that looks fine. And then, like I say, if you want to change the view, you can swipe it, split view. And I do appreciate that, obviously, because I've got this mounted actually in the car and it's got a tint on the back, there will be sort of less light in the evenings, but again, as long as there's headlights heading towards you, you should be able to pick those up okay still. But very sort of responsive in terms of the screen itself, so yeah, really impressed with that. And you have got the voice activation as well, so once you know what all the commands are, it does tell you, and then you're good to sort of, yeah, not have to fiddle with it whilst driving if you want to change some of the settings in terms of the cameras and so forth. Show rear camera, show front camera, so it's really responsive, so yeah, can't argue with that. So when you put the ignition on, it does start everything that you need. The recording happens as long as the GPS is connected and working correctly. You'll see that when traveling, and that's about it really. So yeah, now what you could do if you really wanted to, you could just feed it into the 12 volt, but it would mean you manually having to switch this on and off each time, which would probably be a bit of a pain after a while. So it's definitely worth spending another sort of 10 minutes, if not even that really, just to get it connected how you would expect to see. So I've just been testing out the polarized lens that you can get as an optional extra on that, and I'm not overly impressed. Yes, obviously it would help with sun glare, but what it has done is it's taken the corners off on both sides. Now I believe it's installed correctly. It's quite a tight fit as well, but that's what it looks like. But what I would say is it has quite a large bezel on this, so by having this installed, you can't actually move the camera to the right as far as you would when using this. Now if it was on its own stand, that you can get as another accessory, when mounting to an existing, you would have to either move this all the way across, which then would expose the other mirror, which I think would look a little bit funny, whereas overlapping. So at the moment it looks quite neat, it looks like it's one mirror, but for me to get the full range whilst using the polarized lens, I would have to, yeah, slide it across, which is what I wouldn't want to do. But if I take that off, you can see we've got the corners come back, and then I can move it over more straight away. But that is the lens itself, so I'm sure it'll do what it needs to, and put a slightly darker tint on there for those sunny days. But as you can see, I'm not sure why it's so big, the bezel itself, so it would have been better if that was half the size in terms of the bezel diameter rather than that. But yeah, again, it depends on your setup. Like I say, if you had the normal mount without actually attaching it to your existing, it would be perfectly fine. But yeah, for me, I don't want the other one showing on that basis, and I think it still does a good picture even without that. So yeah, I'll be opting to not install this.
So here's some of the footage from the actual dashcam itself. Obviously it's got the details on there in terms of miles per hour, date, time, everything that you'd want to be able to see. And here's some of the nighttime footage as well. So again, still very visible, and giving you the same level of detail. Now the sound has been removed, so that is an option that you can switch on and switch off. Now Obviously during the daytime the rear camera is very visible. I would say it does have a bit of an effect having a tint on it and having it located where I do, so it is probably beneficial to have it on the outside rather than the inside. And then the polarizing lens, again you do get that fisheye effect, but yeah, definitely something to watch out for.
And this is what it looks from the front of the car. So yeah, it's like I say, it's quite discreet in terms of its presence. It's not like the ones you see where they're all bolted to the sides and the cameras and wires all hanging everywhere. So yeah, no, it's a nice setup.
So first impressions of the Dashcam have been really positive. I've not found any faults so far. Obviously I've only just done the install, but again I will do a follow-up video in the future actually where we're actually towing the Caravan as well, just to give you some other sort of content on that front and just to give you an update of exactly where we are with the Dashcam. But so far, as you can see, it's been quite a simple process in terms of installing, and you've got multiple options to consider depending on how you want to go with that. But yeah, really nice bit of kit, well made, and yeah, couldn't recommend it more. So that's it for this week's video. Hopefully it's given you all the information you were after in terms of this Dashcam. As I said before, there is a discount code below, so hopefully that gives you a few pennies off if you decide to go down this route. And as always, if you've liked the content, if you can consider subscribing, giving it a thumbs up and a share, that would be great. And I will see you all on the next one. Cheers all.